Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Lift Eat podcast, brought to you by Hunt Lift Eat and Hunt Lift Eat Official on Instagram. Back for another awesome episode with my fantastic co-host, Kerry McAllister. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? I'm excited about this one. I got my two bosses on the line.
Kind of like the perfect sequence, man. We're discussing your recent travels and expeditions and Odyssey up in the Great White North, and now we got your outfitting boss on here. We got Tyler Kuhn on here, owner of A-Team Outfitting, man. So Tyler, all the way from Alaska, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just wrapped up some mountain goat hunts the other day, so I'm finally back in town after a super long season. So, that's always a melancholic thing. You always have a lot of fun while you're out there, but you're surely glad when it's finally all done and over with, too.
Everybody only talks about how physically difficult mountain goat hunts are.
Well, in my opinion, they're missing about half the conversation, because not only is it extremely physically difficult, it's also extremely mentally difficult. And that's about it. That there's nothing else good to say about mountain goat hunting.
I think Kerry and I were talking on the last podcast we did together, and he was talking about, you can be a client and you can pay this money and come in and you're there for a hunt, and then the Alaska weather doesn't give a shit about that, and you get socked in, and that's how the weather is, man. And I had a friend who saved up a bunch of money for a mountain goat hunt, and it was 11 or 12 days of just socked in, foggy, can't see more than 50 yards in front of you, and that was it, man. That's just how it shook out.
Yeah, that's super, super common on these goat hunts. We got very lucky. I was down in the Prince William Sound, and we killed two goats. I had two hunters, and they were both buddies, repeat clients of mine, and we luckily killed two very, very nice billies on the same day. And we just beat weather. I mean, we were coming down the mountain. I actually came down with a little bit of the flu that was developing as soon as I got there, and man, it was brutal getting down. But if we would have stayed up there another day, there was probably a 0% chance that these guys were even going to kill a goat. I mean, the weather just turned absolutely horrible. But yeah, two Boone and Crockett billies. So, I mean, we were super stoked about that.
Hell yeah. That's freaking sweet, dude.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, that's badass.
Yeah, man. Yeah. The weather up there, dude, is absolutely gnarly. You said the Great White North. When I was there, it was the Great Wet North.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Well, I want to jump into it, man. And I got a million questions I want to ask you. I think what you do is fascinating, but Tyler, let's start from the beginning, man. Let's roll it back. And, can you kind of give us the origin story of, how did you grow up in the outdoors and your relationship with hunting, and then how we got into owning and running an outfitting business?
Yeah, so pretty much grew up in Western Pennsylvania, hour north of Pittsburgh. Grew up very stereotypical as an outdoor kid in PA, deer hunting, squirrel hunting, turkey hunting. On the farmlands of Western PA, heading up into Central PA into the Allegheny Mountains. Just from the time I was, a small child, just obsessed with being in the outdoors, getting out of the city, and just that was like kind of my escape from, kind of inner city life living in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And it just kind of developed from there, reading the old mountain man stories of Western exploration, the old trapping stories, things like that. And then I started really reading Fur Fish Game magazine articles, became obsessed with, the prospects of going up to Alaska and, and hunting, super remote wilderness areas that Alaska has. And one thing led to another. And I got into my teenage years in high school and started figuring out what these Alaskan guides do and how to become an Alaskan guide. And as soon as I graduated high school, within 2 weeks, my ass was on an airplane heading to Alaska and didn't even know anybody. And then, I that's a whole story in and out of itself. I got kind of screwed over by some outfits at first, lived in a couple homeless shelters, then eventually lived in my truck and just kind of made my way along. And then one thing, led to another over the years, and, did my apprenticeship, became an assistant guide, and then became an outfitter and started my own company. I mean, it was quite the roller coaster ride over a 10-year span, and a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But I mean, it was unbelievable, everything I got to experience thus far.
Dude, that's wild. You took a chance, man.
Well, in my opinion, that's really the only way to do anything in life, is you got to kind of just jump into things and take a chance. I mean, I had no background other than being a small time deer hunter in Pennsylvania. I didn't know anything, I grew up a Northeastern boy myself. So it's like, going into something like that. I mean, you're talking about two complete opposite ends of the hunting spectrum. And I chance, and people took a chance on me, and one thing, led to another, and it all ended up working out in the end. But it was a lot of hard work and perseverance to get there.
That's way cool. That's cool to know. Like, at one point you were a fellow East Coast guy, just like myself and Kerry. And, Kerry and I talked about this a little bit. He was like, I've never hunted grizzly bear before or hunted in this type of terrain before. I'm a hunter, but this is all going to be new to me. And I guess you guys had that conversation before he came out and worked for you. And that was you too at one point, right? And somebody gave you a chance and you just fell in love with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the guy that actually gave me the chance, his name was Scott Hoover. He has since passed away, but like, he was originally from Western PA as well, kind of a local legend in Pennsylvania, hunted all over, killed pretty much everything. And he ended up apprenticing under a legendary Alaskan master guide named Jim Bailey, which I ended up working for Jim as well right before he retired about 2 years ago. And yeah, I mean, he kind of just learned about my aspirations and what I wanted to do, in the career of being an Alaskan guide. He had heard about different problems and things like that I'd had. Like I said, I ended up homeless and things. A couple of the original outfits I worked for didn't work out too well for me. So then, he heard about that through some mutual friends, and then I ended up giving him a ring, and then he's like, "Hey man, well, come up here and apprentice underneath me." And that's essentially what I did, is went up and did my apprenticeship. And I mean, the guy was just phenomenal. I mean, expert level bear hunter and everything. And I mean, that's how I learned how to hunt grizzlies myself.
That's freaking awesome, man. That explains. Well, go ahead, Kerry.
So yeah, go back to my experience. Tyler did not hire me because I'm a super experienced hunter, by the way. Just don't let
he wanted you because you're broken, disabled old man. Is that what he wanted?
Pretty much. I was like, "Hey man, I'm a professional adventurer." He's like, "That's cool. Let's do this." So I'm like, "All right, let's roll."
I believe it was like, we were at, Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. And I believe it was like day 2 or day 3 of talking to Kerry as he'd come by, our booth. And I'd be like, "Hey man, want to go to Alaska?" And that's all it took.
That's all it
I was like, still caveat out there. I cannot carry heavy weight. And he's like, "That's all right. We got packers." I'm like, "Cool. I'm in." And then we didn't have a packer.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get into a lot of stories about Alaskan hunting and how things in general just don't go the way that, you ever hope, especially in regards to weather and pilot scheduling and things like that. I mean, it's just, you start off with an itinerary and a plan, and it's amazing how fast that heads south on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about it, man. What are some of the unique challenges of hunting in Alaska? Surprises in the Alaskan wilderness compared to other regions?
Well, by far and large, as I mentioned, weather is your number one reason you're not going to be successful, or even if you are successful, it's going to make it a lot more hard pressing to get what you want out of the hunt. Because, I mean, I'm not sure what all Kerry had told you about the hunts that we were on, but you can go days and barely even leave your tent. I'm talking waking up at 7 a.m, crawling out of the tent, and it's 8-9 o'clock at night before you know it, and you maybe only had an hour of visibility the entire day, and it's been raining sideways, and you can't see 200 yards from your tent. Like that really, really wears down, not only the days, but people's mental fortitude. Like, the number one reason people don't get animals on these hunts is weather. And then I'd always said number 2 is people's either mental or physical capabilities on a hunt. more so mental than physical. Like I've had guys that physically you'd look at him and you're like, there's no way this guy's going to do what he needs to do. You know, he's overweight, really out of shape, had a lot of accidents in life, injuries, bad knees, bad back, etc. And then he just does phenomenal. And then you have other, guys that are in super, super good shape, come up with the 6-pack and, and they're this big bodybuilder. They live in the gym, but like mentally, like they just can't hack it out there. When they're wet, cold, miserable, they start missing their wife and the kids, and all these mental challenges start coming up, and you just watch within, like, you can see it by the minute. Sometimes guys just mental states just deteriorate, and then you have to become what I call a field psychologist. And next thing you know, you're sitting there mentoring them, trying to keep the guy from like going off the edge, so to speak. So, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. I was telling Kerry some stories out in the field and about some of the crazy stuff that I had seen happen over the years. Like a few years ago, it's probably been about 8-9 years now, but like there was a guy we had in camp. He ended up grabbing a shotgun, a 12-gauge shotgun that one of the Packers had, and he put it underneath his chin and was threatening to shoot himself if we didn't get him off the mountain. So we had to like emergency call in the pilot, and the pilot had to come in and like grab this guy and get him out of there because the guy had a complete mental like snap.
This was a client?
Yeah. Like it's just out of nowhere. Completely unwarranted. You're like, if I remember correctly, it was like a wake up and I'm making Mountain House, biscuits and gravy and getting the water going for coffee. And this guy just has a snap right there on like day 3 of his hunt, like just done. Like, it was crazy.
Wow. It's wild, man. You got to be tough, dude. You got to be mentally and physically tough to go do that stuff. Because you can't just walk off the mountain. You can't just be like, I'm done. Like Tyler's saying, man, like you got to call in like basically an emergency evac, dude. And that's what, about $5,000 a pop for a flight to get out there.
And that's if you can even get it out there. If you're in really bad inclement weather, like up in Alaska, it's insane the exfil that you have to go through, even in an actual dire emergency. I mean, from my understanding, talking to people, especially up in the up here in the interior and like even up in the Arctic, I mean, you have Air Force PJs having to go in sometimes to rescue people. Like, I mean, it's absolutely nuts, the search and rescue operations that go on up here. Now, quick story that just came to mind on the search and rescue thing. There was a pilot that I have worked with a lot in the past. He had some moose hunting DIY clients that he dropped off out in Western Alaska a couple years ago. And they killed this bull and they're butchering this bull. And he broke one of the golden rules about using a knife, and he started cutting towards himself. And he's wearing lacrosse Big Chief hip waders, like you'd trout fish in. And he's cutting his hindquarter off at the ball joint, and he cuts through the hindquarter of the leg, and he lifts it up, and his buddy puts it in a game bag, and he's carrying it over to the spruce tree, and he leans it up against the spruce tree, and he's walking back towards his buddy. And then all of a sudden his buddy looks at him and he's just like, his buddy said, he's like, man, he's like, you don't look so good. He's all white and just pale looking, and he started getting like wobbly. And all of a sudden there's just blood pouring out of the guy's hip boot. Here he was using like Havalon Piranha like razor knife, and he cut through the quarter and stabbed himself in the leg. And next thing you know, he's bleeding out, and his buddy had to wrap a Cat 7 tourniquet around his leg. Long story short, it took hours for Army helicopter to be able to go in there and get them. I mean, it was so windy and rainy, like they couldn't even lower down to grab the guy and pull him up. So like that tourniquet saved his life, and it took hours before they were actually successfully able to safely get in there, grab him, and get him to, Anchorage, to an emergency care facility. I mean, that's how crazy it happened. Even you could be in the most dire emergency on the brink of death, and you still might not be able to get out.
Dude, that's wild.
We actually talked about that a lot too, man. Like, you got to be prepared to self-sustain. Like, you remember our first client that we had on the hunt that I was with you, he brought out, he's like, check out my trauma kit. Remember, he brought out that big trauma kit, which was great, right? Obviously, everybody should have some sort of medical kit while you're out there, but he didn't know how to use any of it. So remember, we had to do like an impromptu, like in the field. I remember I was freezing. It was wet and I couldn't stop shivering, but I'm trying to teach him how to use this stuff.
Like a wilderness first aid course.
Right. Right. And
but,
that's common.
Yeah, Yeah, and that's it kills me, man. Like mentally tough, physically tough, and you've got to be prepared to self-sustain. And that's through any emergency. Like me and Tyler we were running out of food, like,
Mhm.
on our hunt. That guy that stabbed himself in the leg, that's a medical emergency. That's a pretty severe medical emergency, and it's not as common as some of the others, but you got to be prepared to deal with that stuff. Things that come up, maybe not quite as severe as stabbing yourself in the femoral artery and bleeding out in your hip waders, but you got to be prepared for that.
Right. And it happens so fast. I mean, it's just a situation like that, I mean, like you said, that's an extreme example, but you see how out there you could have a round in the chamber walking along, accidentally trip, fall, your gun goes off, you shoot yourself, you shoot somebody with a negligent discharge. You seen how we killed that black bear. I mean, you just walk right up on these animals sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had so many occurrences where I'm just stumbling through willow brush, beating that brush that's 10 foot tall. And next thing you know, you're on a grizzly bear. I mean, it's just insane stories like that where you're 1 minute, everybody's jovial, laughing, having the time of their life. And next thing you know, it's like, holy shit, what are we going to do? Like you're in this mass emergency situation. And like you said, even with the food, after our first client got out, we were expecting a very quick resupply. Well, weather turned sour and we spent, what was it, Kerry, like 4 days waiting for a resupply of food to come in. I mean,
Yep.
it's just crazy.
Me and Tyler sat underneath the tarp, which luckily that was one of the things our first client suggested, was to set up like a communal area tarps. We had set this tarp up, but it was me and Tyler just sitting under this tarp, just staring at each other for 4 days. We couldn't do anything.
The weather was
the weather was off. Like we didn't have a client, so we weren't hunting, right? But we couldn't even glass. The weather was just terrible. So you're sitting under this tarp. I'm running out of food. Tyler's got a good supply left, but because of my jacked up guts, like I'm running out of food. There's nothing to do. We're just staring at each other, just wet and cold. That's when I turned to Tyler and I said, I've done this stuff way too much and I'm way too old for this. What the fuck am I doing?
My favorite thing is once we got about day 2 of 4 of Kerry running low on supplies, he was really eyeballing the ground squirrels that were running around camp and debating on how we were going to get a fire going in this wet environment so he could consume the ground squirrels when he ran out of food.
I think I said at one point, what do you think a 338 Lapua is going to do to one of those? You think anything will be left?
That's funny, man. Yeah. Preparation, dude. Do you find, where do you think like most clients rank on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as preparedness goes?
If you're lucky, you get some 3s and 4s, honestly. I mean, it's bad. Like you got 2 trains of thought. And so you got the guys who have no clue what they're doing, but at least they're vocal and not knowing what they're doing. And then you guys got the guys who think they know what they're doing. Those are the dangerous ones. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, it's the guys who think they know what they're doing that come on these trips. Yeah. Where I'll get a guy comes out in a hunt. Let's say he's some Midwest whitetail hunter, comes out, with 40, 50 years sometimes of whitetail hunting experience, thinks he knows how to handle himself in the woods, saved up, retired, got some money, decides to book a moose hunt in late September. Guy comes on a trip, decked out in his mossy oak camo that he's had for 25 years, everything, his base layers are cotton base long johns, cotton socks, and he shows up on this trip, and then next thing you know, he's thinking he's going to spend 10, 11, 12 days in 35-degree, blowing, 40-mile-an-hour, raining sideways weather. And you're just like, dude, like, didn't you look at the list that I sent you? Oh, yeah. But, I already have all of that. I know what I'm doing. I've been hunting for 40 years. It's like, man, like I get, like, you might be a subject matter expert on, whitetail hunting in Ohio, but like when you come up here to Alaska, like this is a completely different ballgame. Like you could have all the gear and all the preparation, you could have the extra rations, you could have, the proper clothing and all this gear, but even with all the proper provisions, I mean, you still find yourself in a world of hurt pretty quick. So you got these guys that come up that don't listen, that don't go over their checklist that you give them. and they just think they know better. And I've had more hunts end. It's a rarity that I have a hunt that goes 100% of the duration of the trip. And most of the time, the reason it doesn't is because the client just at some point throws in the towel and calls it quits.
Wow.
And most of the time, that reason is because they're so ill prepared, for the trip that they're actually on. And so, yeah, I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, I mean, like I said, I mean, you're lucky if you get some 3s and 4s a lot of the time. I mean, very rarely. And I mean, I can literally name to you like people that I've had, because it's like it stands out when you get somebody that actually knows what's going on, and it's usually the best people I have are like my repeat guys, because I always go on about like you'll have a client and you do the 10-day hunt with them or whatever, and they finally just start to understand what's going on, and then their hunt's over, and then you bring on the next novice, and then you have to do the whole spiel all over again. So it's like when you get those repeat guys, like the guys out on this mountain goat hunt that I just did. I mean, those guys have hunted with me, I think that like 6-7 times now. So it's like those guys have it down to a science to where, like we can actually focus on the hunt rather than me making sure, that they're not drinking the bleach that you're using to treat the water with, like, I mean, some of these guys, I mean, you got to watch their every movement because they're just going to find themselves in trouble if you don't.
Kerry, where did you rank? Were you a 10? I bet you were a 10.
I was probably like an 8. And that was purely because Alaska terrain is different and more gnarlier than anywhere else I've ever been in the world. And I've been a lot of places.
Yeah, that's saying something from you.
Yeah. Now we had so we didn't have too bad of clients on our hunts together. Now we had one that decided to use all of our fuel because he was cold at night. And then we found out about halfway through our second client that there was a much faster and much easier route to go collect water. But he had scouted it out like the first or second day we were there. And he was like, oh, that's not a good way. We should go this other way. And turns out that's because that's where he was going to go shit in the bushes and didn't want to steal in a spot or something. I don't know.
That was bad. That was really bad.
No, but even other than like those two things and the fact that me and Tyler we had maybe one boil left by the time we got our resupply.
Yeah.
Like it were cutting it close. So running out of food, running out of, fuel for our jet boilers or whatever, and then couldn't make a fire because we're above tree line and everything that we had was soaked.
Mm-hmm.
But then the second guy, I mean, like a young guy. So I mean, he didn't have a whole ton of experience, but that dude was a killer. So I think we got pretty lucky with that, especially looking at the clients that were with some of the other guides from the outfitter that you had out there. Like the guy that quit in like day 4 or 5 and said he was hearing police sirens.
Yeah.
100 miles from civilization.
Yeah, that's a whole story in and out of itself. I mean, another mental break, Kerry's referencing there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild, man. So definitely potential Alaskan hunters, or at least first timers, right? Check your ego at the door. Don't go in thinking that you know everything and it's a different type of hunting, and be prepared to listen and follow directions. Is that pretty good advice?
The worst thing, I've been doing this for a decade now, and even a decade into this, I always tell people I have no expectations. Like my expectations for every hunt that I go in, it's like bottom of the bar expectations on what we're actually going to experience. And you want to set that bar low. Everybody talks about setting the bar high for everything. Your expectation level on these hunts, you want to be pleasantly surprised. And most of the time when we go on these hunts, we always end up pleasantly surprised. But if you go into a trip up here thinking that you're going to shoot some massive trophy class animal because you've seen it on TV and, or you read about it in a magazine or just, whatever. And these guys come up with this idea in their head, and then they actually get out there in the field, and it's when they realize it's not the comfort of their couch when they were watching that TV show, it's just all that goes out the window. And And that's when their mind starts going south, because it's like, man, they had this expectation level. It's not happening like that. And then they start getting in their head, and then it just goes downhill. So, I mean, you definitely, I say, is like, whatever's in season, buy your tags, have the expectation level that you're going hunting for the target species that you have tags for. And then other than that, just work hard every day, do what you need to do, and most likely you'll be successful. But don't put the carriage in front of the horse on these hunts, because it's going to be tenfold harder than what you're expecting.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's, we talked about it a lot while we were out there. Like, Alaska doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care who you know, where you came from. It doesn't care how much money you spent to get there.
Right.
Alaska gives zero shits. You've got to put in the work, and then still you may come home empty-handed.
Right. Especially when you have the abiotic factors like weather happens all the time.
Yeah, like our first hunt, man, was like 7 out of the 10 days, dude. We were weathered in. Like we were able to glass for a couple hours some of the days, but it was like almost afternoon, before we could actually like start seeing some mountainside,
Right. And then you have the problem. Sometimes you'll see animals in the late afternoon, evening, and then you require sometimes 5-6 hours to do a stalk, kill an animal, butcher an animal, pack it up, and then bring it back to camp. Well, sometimes you only have 2-3 hours to do 6 hours worth of activities. So then it's like you're hoping, okay, that's the hillside that bear is on, or where that moose is. You put them to bed, so to speak, and then you hope to yourself when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have good visibility, and that you're able to actually find that animal again and go after it and hopefully get it on the ground. And especially on a September like we had this year, I mean, more times than not, it was, the worst outcome. Like, you could have seen something, knew where a legal bull was, and then for the next 2-3 days, not be able to see anything. I mean, you're at ground level fog. I mean, and that's all she wrote at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's not all doom and gloom though. Like, it's definitely like a huge adventure. But again, if you don't show up prepared mentally and physically, like you need to come physically fit. Like, Alaska's terrain is rough, man. It doesn't look rough until you're in it, and then it's about the gnarliest you can get. So you've got to come physically fit. You got to come prepared to know that, like, hey man, like, this is gonna be tough. Like this, like you said, man, it's not sitting on your couch at home. Like, this is real work out here. And like, we were successful with our second hunter. I mean, the dude showed up before tags. So we didn't get all 4 of his animals, but we still came home, with an animal. In fact, I've got 30 pounds of his meat in my freezer.
Hell
so
yeah.
I'm super stoked about how successful he was.
Oh yeah.
Now, Tyler, could you walk us through, if somebody was wanting to book and plan their first Alaskan hunt, what are the hunts that you guys offer, and what's kind of your bread and butter?
Yeah, so primarily we're a bear hunting outfit. So grizzly bear, brown bear, black bear. We also do some moose hunting during the rut from middle of September to the end of September. Bread and butter, like I said, by far and large is bear hunting. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. Bear hunting can be some of the most boring hunting you ever do in your entire life. And, at times it's the most exciting hunting you could do. There's an old saying that bear hunting is 13 days of boredom for 13 seconds of excitement. So, I'm obsessed with it. I mean, I can go on and tell you some crazy bear stories. I can have a 2-hour conversation about that, of some of the ordeals that I've come across over the years. But yeah, I mean, bear hunting, especially on the side of grizzly, doing an interior grizzly hunts, they're a little bit smaller of a bear, 7, maybe 8 foot, true grizzly bear interior grizzlies. But yeah, I mean, I just love chasing bears around. In the springtime, we're hunting them during mating season when they're out chasing sows during the rut. Early fall, we're on the salmon streams down on the river. And then up in September, which is when Kerry was up here with us, we're up high trying to find berries up in the bears up in the blueberry patches. So, I mean, that's what's cool too, is unlike some seasons where you only have maybe, let's say, a week or two of quality hunting of the whole year, bear hunting, especially here in Alaska, they give you so many options to go out and chase bears around in the woods.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, different ecosystems throughout different times of year chasing the same animal. That's kind of pretty nifty too, man. Get to see all kinds of different stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, especially the time of the year you were up here. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, leaves turning colors, blueberries, sprouting everywhere. I mean, there's no timber. There's high brush down low, but when you get up high up above the brush line, you can glass bears just moving around in the berry patches with your binos. And it's fun because then you can make a plan and do a stalk and play the wind and, get on the bear. I mean, that's just so exciting to me. And a lot of guys, guys either love bear hunting or they hate it. And once you get addicted to that, man, it's just like, it doesn't, you don't get rid of it once you've done it for the first time.
I've got some unfinished business with a black bear in Alaska that I need to come back and handle. Maybe I need to handle that with you, Tyler. But when my only time I've been hunting in Alaska, I went black bear hunting in the Talkeetna Range. And I was telling Kerry, I was like, I've never seen so much country in my entire life at once. It was like staggering. Couldn't believe a place is that big ever. I'm from North Georgia. And, I'm looking out here in my backyard, you're shooting less than 100 yards here. 100 yards is like a long way. Went there and it's just like forever, right? And I have never seen such little signs of life in my entire life. We didn't see a single bear. We saw one cow moose, and that was it. And we were there I think I had the 13 days of boredom bear hunting. That's what I signed up for.
Did you hunt Unit 14 or Unit 13? Do you remember?
I don't know. I was with my buddy who was stationed up there, and I was just tagging along, following him around, doing what he said to do.
Yeah, I've hunted the Talkeetnas a lot. I mean, I've killed dozens and dozens of bears in the Talkeetnas. And what's interesting about the Talkeetnas, for an example, is like you mentioned about how barren everything was. If you look at like wildlife placement across the entire state, the Talkeetna Range actually has more bears per square mile than a lot of the places north, like up in the interior and the Arctic. So it's like you go up more and more north in the state, it gets more and more barren. So it's always interesting, even in these places like the Talkeetnas for grizzly and for black bear, that, they're pretty available, and there's a lot of targets of opportunity in the Talkeetnas. But even still, like you said, I mean, there's so much vast country where you could just spend days and days and days looking for something that doesn't even seem like it's there. And then all of a sudden, the same hillside you've looked at 10,000 times.
Yeah.
On the 10,001st time, you glass right back over there, and there's the bear just standing there. You have no idea how the hell it got there, how long it's been there. I mean, you thought you just looked at that hillside 60 seconds ago, and now there's a shooter bear just standing there eating blueberries. I mean, it's just it's nuts to see that.
Yeah, it's wild.
We had a couple of incidents like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
just looking at a mountain, all of a sudden a moose. You're like, where the hell did you come from?
Yeah, I know they were there because following our tracks back from where we were glassing up top, there were bear tracks in our tracks that were not there when we were on our way up. So I know they were there. We're just probably bad hunters, but I need to get back up there and find me a Alaska bear.
They're around, man. Plenty of them.
Yeah. You got any sweet run-ins with grizzlies or brown bears?
Yeah. As I alluded to a little bit ago, I mean, I've had some gnarly ones. One really good story I can share. So it involves Scott Hoover, the guy that trained me on all this a few years ago. It's probably been about 6 years ago now, I'm going to say. We had these clients that were repeat guys of ours, and they were buddies, and they always hunted together. And typically what would happen is if me and Scott had like a 2-on-1 type hunt, me and Scott would guide them together. Like Scott would take one guy, I'd take the other type of deal. And we're out of this cabin, and on day one of the trip, Scott's guy is super lucky, shoots a nice grizzly. They come back to the cabin. Me and my client come back to the cabin, and we're celebrating, partying it up. Scott got a nice bear, and Scott had an option that next day because the float plane came in, grabbed the client and his bear that was successful, and then they fly back all the way back to like the main base camp. And Scott could have went back to the base camp, but he chose not to go, and he decided to hunt with us instead. And I ended up being very glad and thankful that he decided to stay with us because of what happens next. So the next evening, and to give a little backstory on this, we're hunting in these salmon streams, and this is like early August at the time. And the bears at that time of the year are still pretty nocturnal. We're shooting 70% of the bears that we kill from like 9 o'clock at night to about 2 o'clock in the morning. And for those that don't know, I mean, Alaska at that time of the year, there's still a lot of daylight. I mean, we're not full 24-hour a day daylight still, but like in that part of the state where I was, I mean, we're still getting a good 18 hours of daylight a day. So, I mean, there's a lot of hunting time. You can hunt yourself to death at that time of the year. So we spike out from the cabin. We're heading down to this salmon stream, and we're there for, let's say, 2-3 hours. I'm looking up one way of the river. Scott's looking down the other. We got the client kind of stationed in between us in the middle, and we're glassing. And then all of a sudden I hear Scott like kind of whisper us like, bear, bear, bear. And he like taps the hunter and he's pointing downstream, and I look, and there comes this grizzly, and it's working the gravel bar, and it's looking for fish, and it's milling around trying to find some salmon. At the time there were red salmon in the river there. And so Scott tells me, he's like, Ty, just stay on the glass and keep an eye on things. And then Scott gets on his rifle to do a backup shot. In Alaska, guides are allowed to do backup shots on bears if they're wounded or like if they're attacking. So the hunter was cool with us doing the backup shot. So Scott's on his rifle, getting ready to do a backup shot. The hunter's on his 375 H&H, and Scott's using a custom lever action 457 custom. It's kind of like a necked up 4570. So they're shooting big guns here. And I'm on the binos, and I'm just watching this getting ready to unfold, and I'm going to be kind of like the spotter on this situation. So Scott tells the client, hey, when you get a shot opportunity, I'm ready. Just, take your shot and I'll do the backup. And the hunter's on his rifle, and he's looking down his scope, and he was on some shooting sticks, I remember. And the client, as I'm looking down my binos, I can kind of see out of my peripheral on my left side, the hunter's on his stick, but then he starts shuffling around, and he's like moving the stick forward, repositioning himself. And he gets back up on the gun, and his eyes looking down the scope, and the bear turns perfectly broadside, and it had just caught a salmon in its mouth, and it was getting ready to climb up on this high bank and head into the timber. And all of a sudden, the hunter's gun just goes off. And as soon as the hunter's gun goes off, the bear just like rears up, and the fish goes flying out of its mouth, and the fish goes flying through the air. And all of a sudden, like instantaneously when that happens, I hear a thud, and like I like see again on my peripheral, like Scott's like simultaneously, like his gun goes off. There's a splash in the water, and Scott like falls to the ground. And the bear runs off, and I'm like looking at Scott, and Scott's laying there on his side. His hat's blown off. Knee-jerk reaction. I thought the client shot Scott in the head because that's what it looked like.
Oh my gosh.
His hat blew off. Scott falls. His gun just goes off, and he's on the ground, and he's not moving. And I like grab Scott, and I roll him, and he looks up at me, and his eyes are all big. Here, when the client had moved forward, the client was shooting a 375 H&H with a muzzle brake. And he put the muzzle brake right next to Scott's head and shot without realizing. And the concussion knocked Scott completely over, blew the hat off his head, knocked him over. Scott can't, Scott can't hear anything. Like he's completely deaf at this point right now. And he's like concussed. So like we had to like sit there for like 20 minutes, and Scott he's like dazed and like he's out of it. And he's like, dude, he's like, what happened? Like, did he hit the bear? I was like, I mean, I know we hit the bear because the bear reared up and the fish went flying out of its mouth. And, so he's like, okay, so we know the bear's been hit, but like the bear's not dead laying there. Bears seldom die where you shoot them. So, my general rule of thumb is like, if you don't see a bear die, you wait at least an hour, depending on how you think it was shot. So we wait by the time Scott kind of came back together and we waited an hour, we'll probably talk about a good hour and a half here. So we wait across the river, and I go up on the bank, and the fish is laying there dead up on the bank. So like that's the spot. And we see the wet, fresh tracks going up in. There's really no blood because, bears don't bleed for one, and two, it's a soaking wet bear that just came out of the river. So we're like kind of milling around a little bit up in the brush, and there's game trails everywhere. I mean, these bear trails, bears were tearing this river bottom up. So it was kind of hard to tell where the bear went because there were fresh game trails everywhere you looked. So we're milling around, we started seeing a couple little speckles of blood, like really wet blood that was very diluted, hard to see. And why Scott decided to do this, I don't know. Because mind you, Scott can't hear anything. So he's slightly ahead of me, like kind of leading, looking for a sign of where this bear went. We're looking for tracks and everything. And we're working along, and I'm kind of diagonal behind Scott. And he's only maybe 2 to 5 feet ahead of me. And as we're going down this one bear trail, up ahead of me, I hear like a, and it's like kind of faint, but like I stop. Scott can't hear anything. So he's like, he keeps going. And I'm like, Scott, I think I hear something. He doesn't hear me, and he just keeps going. I'm like, Scott. And then like all of a sudden, like I say it like really loud, like almost kind of like a yell. I'm like, Scott. And he like stops, and he like turns his head, and he like looks back at me. And all of a sudden, these bushes probably 30 to 50 yards ahead of us start shaking. And all of a sudden I hear, oh, and this bear just comes like flanking us. Like it starts running like from the center ahead of us 30 to 50 yards. And then it runs like to our right, stops, and then runs back to the left, and then just heads down this trail ahead of us. And the hunter's like freaking out, like he's like, what was that? Like, what's going on? And then we tell the hunters like, dude, like, don't come in here. He's standing out in the gravel bar a little bit because we went ahead of him to kind of see what we could see if we could find the bear. We tell the client, like, don't come in here. Like, this bear's very much alive still. We know it's wounded, and it's wounded bad enough to be like bedded up in the brush not far from where we had shot it. So like it's hurt probably pretty good at this point, we can tell. So we wait a little while longer again, and then we start making our way down this game trail that we know this bear is on. And this bear trail gets to a point where it like wise off. So like there's I can describe it as like kind of a tree island. So there's this high bank that's in the middle of this wide off game trail. And it's some really tall brush and some spruce trees that are probably like 20, 30 foot tall spruces. And we can't tell because you don't see tracks very well in Alaska. And like this is something that Kerry could attest to too. Like that, like to me, even now, 10 years later, is very surprising. Like an animal, you could have a moose, a 1,600-pound bull moose, step in an area, and then you'd never know it was there because it doesn't leave any tracks. The ground's super spongy. So we're trying to figure out like where this bear went. There's these two main trails and a bunch of little fingers that come off of it. So me and Scott figure like, like let's just, we figured that the trails probably reconverge just based off of how the topography looked with this like tree island. And so Scott's like, I'm going to walk this left trail and you walk this right trail. And if we start seeing sign, we'll let each other know, and then we'll reconverge and keep following the sign. So I'm going right, Scott's going left, and we're like at times we're damn near on our hands and knees looking down these little trails. You're looking for blood, you're looking for broken branches and stuff. And we're going. And I can kind of at times see the top of Scott's head as we're going through like in the middle of us through this brush and everything. And we get to where the trail just starts reconverging. And I see Scott coming around his corner and I'm coming around mine, and I'm kind of looking down this little side trail, and Scott's like kind of facing away from me, his back's, kind of turned towards me, and he's looking down this little trail. And as I'm looking at Scott, to the right of Scott, maybe 20, 30 yards or so, I see like this brush start shaking again, like the tops of brush. And then all of a sudden, like this brush just explodes, and this brown, all I see is a brown blob running towards Scott. And to this day, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen shot wise. Like this bear's like just snarl, like doing this like running snarl roar thing. like the craziest sound, brush is exploding and it's running right at him. I'm literally in the process, and this happened, what I'm about to say happened so fast. I'm in the process of turning with my gun to turn on the bear. Scott sees the bear out of his peripheral coming at him. He doesn't even have his gun shouldered. He does this swing hip fire shot, shoots this bear high up on the back, like up, like kind of like where I can describe like where the neck kind of meets its back, like by the spine, shoots this bear. This bear just pile drives right into the dirt and dies like less than 10 feet from him. And just
holy shit,
like damn near comes to a skidding stop, damn near at his feet. Dead.
oh my
just
gosh,
knocked the life clean out of it. Yeah.
That's that 13 seconds of
yeah. Yeah. Like,
dude, man, I keep telling you, like, what you do is the parallels between what you do and what I used to do are so similar, man. And just they say combat's 90% boredom, 10% sheer terror. There you go, right there, bear hunting. 13 days of boredom for 13 seconds of like, holy shit.
Right. Well, and and kind of a little finisher to that story, what's interesting is too, like how much abuse these bears can take. So like, we're like in shock and awe right now. Like, holy shit. Like, like Scott literally almost got grabbed by this grizzly.
yeah.
And the hunter's like freaking out at this point, like
So he's still down at the gravel bar?
He's still on the gravel bar, just like cradling his rifle, not knowing what's going on. Yeah, and then he hears this bear again, and then the single gunshot, go off, and he's screaming to us now, like, "What the hell is going on, guys? Are you okay? You okay?" And we're yelling back to him, like, Jeff, get on in here. We got your bear. We're like freaking out, we're like shaking, like you're just like trembling. And he like comes in and he's like all nervous and he like, come here, man, come on. Like, and he comes in and he sees the bear and, like we're all high-fiving and going crazy. And where it gets crazier yet is, so we take our pictures, and it's time to start butchering this bear. And so we find immediately, like I said, Scott high, kind of in that middle of the shoulder, up where the neck meets the spine on the back. That's like the kill shot. We ended up finding where the hunter had hit the bear. And here the hunter had hit a little far back, kind of liver punched it, blew up the guts real bad. The bear was pretty bad off. Like, it was going to die, but like it was one of those situations like it couldn't go very far. And that's why it charged us rather than keep running. Like, that bear was at a point like it couldn't go any further. So that was like its last ditch effort at life of defending itself. And we also noticed another entrance and exit wound in like kind of in the guts of the bear. And we were like, like, what is this? Like, it just didn't make any sense. Like, we were trying to figure out, like, did the hunter's bullet do something crazy? Did Scott's bullet do something crazy? Well, here, if you remember when I mentioned about the splash in the water, here what Scott's round did is Scott shot several feet in front of the bear. His projectile hit the river, bounced off the river, and hit the bear.
No shit.
Yeah, so like this bear was just like blown up full of lead, even with a Hail Mary shot like that. And the thing still had enough drive to pretty much get 7, 10 feet away from Scott and almost, yanked him up and, had his way with him. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. Again, like how you can go from sitting on a gravel bar, see a bear, shoot a bear, everybody's high-fiving, and next thing you know, you're almost getting chewed on.
That's a tough critter, man. Holy cow.
Dude, yeah. Yeah, man. And I had a little PTSD flashback when he talked about him getting that concussed from the muzzle brake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my left ear stopped working as I flashed back to when that happened to me once. That's wild. Like, I could feel his pain.
Mm-hmm.
But dude, that whole 13 days of boredom for 13 seconds of just pure insanity, dude. But like, talk a little bit more about like after the kill, man. Like, because we talked a lot about like, you're not going to get out there and then, like willy-nilly walk back to the trailhead, drive home when you're ready to, you can get weathered in. And you may be out there, you have to be prepared to self-sustain. But like, we saw it a little bit with our bear. Like, just because you kill something doesn't mean you're done, right? Like
Right.
there's a lot of stuff that you have to do in camp to care for that, you know, because we didn't know how long. We killed ours, I think. I don't know, day 18 or something like that. And we
Yep.
didn't know if we were planning on getting out on day 26. But obviously it could have been later. But like, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to keep that meat, to keep the hide and everything like that too.
Yeah. So like prefacing that a little bit. So in Alaska, one thing I love about Alaska is we have great game laws on a lot of things up here. Like, for example, wanton waste laws, especially in a guide capacity, guide outfitter capacity. If you waste game meat on animals that have wanton waste laws, which are essentially any ungulate, and then at times of the year, you know, you have your bylaw required to claim bear meat, which especially on the black bears and especially in the fall, I claim my bear meat anyway, even though when it's out of season to where you don't bylaw have to because of the, you know, conditions like, you know, trichinosis, you know, parasites like that and everything. But like you
Yeah.
can actually get a Class C felony in Alaska if you don't properly handle your game meat. And it is a big problem for moose where guys get overwhelmed. They shoot a bull, they got a big bull down, and now you got 6, 7, 800 pounds of meat off the bone that you know, meat that you have to take care of. So like there's a lot of ways that we have to go about, you know, preserving the meat in the field. And we had harvested a black bear that Kerry was kind of alluding to there. And obviously, like we're retaining the bear meat, we're retaining the bear hide and skull. So, and we're in middle to late September, super wet environment. The worst thing for meat and hide is moisture. So, especially if it starts getting warm on you, moisture and warmth, it takes no time at all for spoilage to occur and you start getting bacterial growth. So, especially when you're above tree line, it's very difficult because you don't have the ability to hang meat, to hang hide, and things like that. You know, your best friends when it comes to handling meat and hide in the field, especially in a place super remote off the road system like a lot where we hunt in Alaska, you want that 360-degree airflow. So preferably you can hang it from a tree, but where we were, you couldn't do that. So you have to do what, you know, a lot of babysitting of your meat. So, you know, you want to keep it in the shade. If you got a tarp, you know, you want to make kind of like a lean-to type tarp shelter if possible. If nothing else, like where we were by the time we had killed our bear, we were lucky that the temperatures were dropping pretty rapidly at that point, especially in the evenings, to where like, you know, as long as we kept it out of direct sunlight, we were fine. One of the things Kerry did really good was he took it upon himself to really babysit the meat cache because not only do you have to prevent, you know, spoilage from occurring, like making sure the air flows good, you know, keep moving the meat around. So, you know, part of your meat pile isn't just compressed up against the ground or compressed too tightly against other meat to where the, you know, it can't get airflow over it to keep it cold. And then you got to keep it away from birds. You know, the ravens will completely destroy your cache so fast. Like it's insane. Like you leave it exposed for 2 hours. Next thing you know, you have 12 ravens just destroying everything.
Right.
And then other bears, you know, like as days went on, we had so many bears getting closer and closer and closer to camp. I mean, the black bear we harvested, it was funny because it was the second time this happened to me in a relatively, you know, close amount of time. Was we shot the bear like not even 200 yards from the tent, you know, after hunting all day long.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the bears, they know you're there. And once bears stop caring that you're there, you know, they're coming, especially when you got meat. And especially if you got moose or caribou or a dull sheep or a mountain goat in your camp hanging up somewhere. I mean, they're coming. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to do to keep that meat safe from scavengers and safe from the elements. We always carry around too. Granted, we didn't really need it because, again, it wasn't super warm. So we didn't really need to justify doing it. But I always carry like citric acid powder or like vinegar. Vinegar works really good in a spray bottle. And I'll take like a spray bottle with some, you know, some clean filtered water, mix in some citric acid, put it on the mist setting on your spray bottle. And every other day or so, you know, just mist that meat with that citric acid or that vinegar. And that slows that bacterial growth down. You know, having good quality game bags, like we use Alaska game bags up here, you know, that keep it aerated, keep the flies from laying eggs on it. I got to show Kerry what our flies, how that looks. I mean, it looks like moss almost, but they'll just start shitting eggs all over your meat. And if you don't notice that and you don't get them fly eggs off, especially if it gets warm on you, next thing you know, you got maggots all over the meat. And sometimes they lay those eggs in the game bag. If you don't have it properly sealed, you might not even know what's happening. And then you get home from your hunt, get back to the house, open up your game bag, thinking that you're going to start processing your moose, and there's just maggots eating your meat, like, and you didn't even know. So, like, I mean, it's you, and hide. I've seen that happen with the hides too, where guys will unroll their bear hide, unroll their moose cape, and then next thing you know, it's just like inundated in fly eggs and maggots. So then you got to clean that up and hope you can even salvage it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. We always carry salt in the field with us. Again, as you get later in the season, that's not, always appropriate, and that you don't always have to do that. But having a good understanding of how to work hide and fur handle is a big trait that you need to be able to, learn and inhibit during your hunts, because, you need to be able to flesh, turn the ears, the eyes, the nose, the lips, flesh the hide completely, and then be able, if needed, to salt that hide and dry it out. Because again, you don't want that moisture on that hide, especially like in situations like me and Kerry found ourselves in multiple times during this trip. You might think you're getting out on day 11. Well, it could easily turn into day 15, 16, 17 before you get out. And if you don't have the proper provisions to take care of that meat, take care of that hide, even though you think you've already punched your tag and your hunt's over, you could lose everything that you harvested by just gross negligence because you didn't come prepared to handle that hide and handle that meat. So, I mean, that's something before you go on an Alaskan hunt up here, in your home state. I tell everybody, go to a taxidermist. Taxidermy guys, they love when hunters come in and say, hey man, let me volunteer my time. Let me sweep your floors, help clean up the shop, and, maybe show me how to fur handle a little bit. Taxidermists love to show you how to handle hides, because the more hunters that know how to handle hides better and their trophy, better, it makes their job a whole lot easier too as a taxidermist. Right. So
less shit
get
for
that.
them to fix. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, get that information. A lot of guys, especially in the taxidermy world, they're wanting to give that information out for free. I mean, I've even had one of the ways I learned how to butcher a lot of animals was, I went to my local, butcher shop, and I was asking them like, how can I keep this meat clean? And, what can I do to help, better the quality of my meat when I, drop it off here? And, they're just handing you out free advice. So, gain those skills before you come out to Alaska or Canada, or, even out west in Montana, or Colorado, Wyoming, etc. Before you do an off the road system or a remote backcountry trip, that's a, super important thing to have in your mental toolbox before you go on a hunt like this.
Yeah, I've actually been hanging out at our local processor. Really cool dude. He's trying to get up to do some stuff in Alaska as well. But yeah, I've been out there and hanging out with him. But I will tell you, if you're going to do that, do it prior to rifle season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do it during bow season. Cause, once rifle season comes, dude, those guys are way too busy to be teaching you. But yeah, man, like hide care, meat care, all that stuff is super important. And then like for doing what I'm trying to do with Tyler is I'm trying to take care of somebody else's animal. Right. And so like with that bear, I think you guys were up on the mountain and you shot me a message and said, hey, plane's coming in to get the bear meat. You might want to get it off the bone. And so I just went and just ripped it off, because I had no idea when this plane's getting here, because these bush pilots, they're not like commercial airlines where they've got set times that they're going to be there. The plane's just going to show up at some point, And so like, luckily the client already told me I can have all the meat. And so I was just ripping it off, but like, I can't do that. If like, say you come up and you pay Tyler to go hunt and to take you on these hunts, and Tyler screws up your meat, you're going to be pretty upset. And so I've been working on that. But I mean, like, if a hunter comes up and tries to do that himself, man, like that would be just super awesome. Another helping hand to try to take care of his own meat, his own hide, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super vital, especially for big animals like moose or elk. Like there's a lot of meat to handle. I mean, like I mentioned, on some of these bull moose that we kill, 600 to 800 pounds of meat. I mean, that's what you're going to bring home. And not only having to, from the place that bull dies, getting it put in your ruck and then hauled to a place where your base camp is, or your spike camp, or the airstrip, or the lake, that you're getting picked up on, the gravel bar. That's a feat in itself. But then taking care of the meat and processing that meat, the more you will impress, especially if you're going on a guided hunt or a semi-guided hunt. You're going to impress your guide and outfitter, so much more. And even if you're doing a DIY trip, getting dropped off somewhere, and you're with a buddy, just being able, or by yourself completely, like having that knowledge, it's just going to make your overall experience 10 times better. And it may end up saving your animal in the long run.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's super good advice there. There's a lot to it, man. And you're the guy, right? So you're always thinking about and mitigating and trying to plan and know what thoughts are going through your clients' heads, man, all while trying to make them successful. So you got a full-time job, Tyler.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those jobs, that you have a great time while you're doing it, but it's a job. So, one of the biggest cons of doing this, especially, full time in the middle of the season, in your busy season, like up here, you're talking August, September, into October. I mean, that's like the Super Bowl, you're just going nonstop all day in and day out. Like Kerry mentioned, I mean, what was it, Kerry? We did like 26 days straight, I think it was.
We were supposed to. We ended up doing 23 because the weather was coming in pretty gnarly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people can't even wrap their mind around that. Like 23 days out in the bush, like you're not taking a proper shower. You're not eating a proper meal. You're from, sun up to sunset the entirety of the time, just going crazy with, the guiding thing. So, you lose a lot of time to hunt for yourself. You're away from friends and the family and everything. So, there's a lot of cons to it too. But, I always say when the job is good, it's great. Like, it's like the greatest job on the planet. Like, there's nothing better than like on this hunt, that the second hunt, for example, that me and Kerry went on. We had a young client, shot a nice black bear. Everybody is going crazy, high-fiving and everything. Like, it's just, you got this nice bear, you got all this meat, a beautiful hide. It's unbelievable, and then it's like, wow, like that's why I do what I do, like that's to make somebody's dream like that come true, to where somebody paid all this money and they've been anticipating this 1, 2, 3 years in advance, and they're finally here on their trip, and then they made it happen, and you helped them make it happen. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's freaking awesome, dude. We're rolling up over an hour here, but I was going to ask you, why should folks book with A-Team Outfitting, man? And that answer you just gave that's the reason right there, man. You love,
and Kerry works for him,
and Kerry could possibly be there, right?
You're right. I mean, that's reason enough right there. I mean, I don't even need to say anything more.
That's right,
dude. Like, I bring everything you need, man. I'm your alarm clock. You can ask Tyler. Tyler's when he hears, oh fuck, he knows it's time to get up. It's me crawling out of my tent.
Yeah, you usually hear an "oh fuck," and then you hear Kerry's spine snapping in multiple places as he crawls out of the tent.
But yeah, man, you love seeing your clients be happy and be successful, and that's huge. I think that's very telling of your operation there.
Well, I appreciate, the statement, because, like that's why we do what we do, for sure. And any good guide, that's why they do what they do. It's just, you're making people's dreams come true every single day out there.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man. Well, Karen and I have already talked about this. We'd like to get a Hunt, Lift, Eat crew out there with you maybe next fall, the following, man, and get some Alaska experience for us.
For sure. I mean, like I told Kerry, you guys are welcome anytime, and I'd love to get a Hunt, Lift, Eat crew out there and, see what we can do.
We'll make it happen, man. And if folks are listening to this and they want to check out A-Team Outfitting, where can they check you guys out and learn about your hunts and stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find us on Facebook. We got the Instagram, just A-Team Outfitting across all social media platforms. All the contact info and everything's out on there. We're always putting new videos, photos, things like that up, on social media. ateamoutfitting.com is the website. You can check that out too. Everything we keep that all up to date, as the season comes and goes. So yeah, I mean, if you have any questions about anything, even if you don't even want to book a hunt with us and you just got questions about, some other hunt you booked in Alaska, or you're doing a DIY hunt and just want some advice, I'm always down to talk to people about, what it takes and, what you should be expecting on an Alaskan big game hunt up here.
Hell yeah, man. Also, shout out to you or whoever runs your website, because I was checking out your website before we jumped on here. I hate when outfitters have terrible websites, and most outfitters do, and they're just ass. It drives me crazy. I'm like, it's so simple. You have a great website, and it's navigable, and it's not cluttered, and great job, Tyler.
Well, it's not even you got to briefly before we went onto the conversation here. You got to meet Brittany very briefly there. I can't take credit for I can't take any credit for that. I just carry a big rifle around and shoot bears. She handles all the tech side.
Well, I hate when outfitters have sloppy websites. So good job. I'm in. I'm all in. That's all I need.
Hey, Carter, so man, Brittany's a team member, by the way.
Heck yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Taking over Alaska. Maybe Brittany needs to do our website.
I'll let her know.
Oh, fuck yeah. Kerry, you got anything, man?
No, man. Alaska's tough. It's tough. You got to be tougher.
Yeah. That's the gist of it. I mean, it's just come up here prepared to, embrace the misery of it all, and you got to just live in the moment and just kind of take it all in. And, it's an absolutely beautiful place, like as my background. I mean, I don't know how much of the background, I mean, it somewhat fades in and out for me from my point of view, but I mean, that's what you're going to see every day, like you're going to be seeing the mountains, and you're just out there in the expanse of the wilderness, just whoever's in camp with you in your own mind, and that's it. And
it's a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, Tyler, thanks for your time, dude. Glad we can make this work. Looking forward to chatting more with you and A-Team Outfitting, and listeners. As always, appreciate the hell out of you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.